For the better part of 4 months, somebody was washing our dishes, sweeping our floor, and fixing the hinge on the back door that had been squeaking since before half our membership was born, and not one of us had the first idea who it was. We're the wayward sons, out of a stretch of back road in eastern Kentucky most maps don't bother naming, and I'll tell you plainly that finding out who'd been doing it changed every one of us more than we changed him. People around here have called us outlaws for as long as I've worn this patch, mostly because it's easier to call a man a name than to learn anything true about him. I'd stopped arguing the point years before any of this happened. I'm only bringing it up now because of how wrong that word turned out to be, measured against what a 14-year-old boy taught 30 grown men about family that winter. It started small enough that nobody made much of it. A member named Dutch mentioned the coffee can was full when he was sure he'd left it empty. Somebody else noticed the jukebox, dead for 2 winters, suddenly playing again, the wiring patched with electrical tape and a steadier hand than any of us owned. The couch cushions got straightened. The bathroom got a bar of soap nobody bought. We joked about it the way men joke about things they don't understand and don't feel like worrying over, said we had a clubhouse ghost, said maybe one of the wives was sneaking in to clean up after us out of pity, and went on with our business, because none of us were in the habit of looking too hard for trouble that wasn't bothering anybody. Our clubhouse is an old roadhouse bar we bought for almost nothing 15 years back, the kind of building with a tin roof that groans in any wind worth mentioning and a back room nobody had cleaned out since the place sold liquor instead of motor oil. We're not a large chapter, maybe 30 riders on a good Saturday, but we'd kept that building standing through 2 roof replacements and 1 flood, and every one of us had some piece of sweat in those walls. So when things in it started getting better instead of falling further apart, it bothered exactly nobody enough to actually investigate. Looking back, I think most of us liked the mystery better than we would have liked an answer. I run the chapter, which mostly means I'm the one who gets blamed when something goes wrong and ignored when something goes right, and I was the one who finally found out what was actually happening, on a Tuesday morning in late January, cold enough to crack a man's knuckles just walking to his truck. I came in early to deal with paperwork before the rest of the chapter showed up, and the storage loft above the old bar, a space we used for nothing but spare parts and a couch nobody claimed, had a sound coming out of it that wasn't right. I found a boy up there, maybe 14, burning with fever under 2 stolen sleeping bags, too sick to do anything but shake, his backpack clutched against his chest, even half-conscious like somebody might take it from him in his sleep. The loft smelled like wet cardboard and the particular staleness of a place nobody's supposed to be living in. It took me a full minute of looking at him, scrawny and gray-faced and clearly half-starved, to understand that this was our ghost. His name, once we got enough water and aspirin into him to make sense, was Cole. He'd been living in that loft since the end of October. Climbing in through a window with a busted latch he'd found one night looking for somewhere out of the rain, and once he realized nobody locked the storage room from the inside, he just stayed. He worked out the patterns of when the place emptied and when the first member showed up, and built his whole existence around the gaps in between, sleeping in the cold afternoons when nobody was around, doing his small repairs and his cleaning in the dead of night, gone by 6 every morning before any of us arrived, carrying everything he owned in a backpack he had behind a stack of old tires. 3 months of that. 3 months of a boy doing chores for men he'd never once let see his face, because in his mind it was the only rent he had to offer for a roof that wasn't supposed to be his. We asked him, once the fever broke and he could talk without his teeth chattering, why he never just knocked on the door. He looked at me like I'd asked something a little stupid and said he figured a clubhouse full of bikers would either call the cops on a trespasser or worse, and at least this way he was useful instead of a problem. I didn't have a good answer for that kind of logic from a 14-year-old, mostly because it had clearly worked for him longer than it should have. It also explained, finally, why the work had always been so thorough. A boy auditioning every single night for the right to stay another day doesn't cut corners. The rest of it came out slow, over that first week, in pieces Cole never seemed to want to hand over all at once. His mother had passed when he was 11. His stepfather, a man named Earl Hutchins, had married her 2 years before that and kept the house and the custody, and, Cole made a point of saying without much weight in his voice, the monthly check that came with both. Earl wasn't the kind of man who left marks where a teacher might see them, but he was the kind who made a house feel smaller every year a boy lived in it, and Cole left on a night in October he never described in much detail and that none of us asked him to. What he did tell us, in the matter-of-fact way kids sometimes describe the worst parts of their lives, was that Earl had never once called him by his actual name in 4 years, just the kid or worse, and that the house had 2 bedrooms but Cole had slept on a pull-out in the laundry room since his mother died, because Earl said growing boys didn't need much. He told us this without asking for sympathy, the same flat tone he used to tell us how he liked his eggs, and I think that flatness is what got to all of us more than if he'd cried about it. I want to say we handled it with some grand plan from the start, but the truth is we mostly handled it the way men handle things they care about and don't fully understand, clumsily, and together. We got him to a doctor first, no questions asked at the desk that we didn't have decent answers for. We got him real food and a real bed, in the spare room above Dutch's garage, because nobody on that loft couch was getting another night of it if I had any say. And then, because 3 of our members happened to be a nurse, a paralegal, and a man named Singer who used to wear a deputy's badge before he decided he liked our company better, we started doing the part that actually mattered, making sure nothing about Cole's situation could be undone by a man with a checkbook and a grudge. Singer found Earl Hutchins inside of a week, mostly because Earl wasn't hiding. He'd already filed a missing person report, not out of worry, Singer said, but because a missing dependent stops a check from clearing. That told us everything about the kind of fight we were walking into, and none of it was the kind a man settles with his fists. So we didn't. Our paralegal, a sharp, soft-spoken woman named Renata who'd been riding with us for going on a decade, filed for emergency guardianship the same week, built on a doctor's report, a school enrollment Cole hadn't had in over a year, and statements from every one of us about exactly how we'd found him and exactly what kind of shape he'd been in. It was slow, unglamorous work, filled with forms and waiting rooms, and I'll admit there were nights I wanted nothing more than to ride out to Earl Hutchins's place and settle the whole thing the old way. Every time, somebody in that clubhouse reminded me that the fastest way to lose a 14-year-old boy to the system for good was to give a judge a reason to call us exactly what the town already assumed we were. Those weeks while Renata built the case were, I think, the best stretch of that whole winter. Cole started coming down to the clubhouse most evenings once school let out, not hiding anymore, just present, doing homework at the end of the bar while Dutch argued with somebody about carburetors, learning to play poker badly enough that we all suspected he was losing on purpose just to keep getting invited back. Singer taught him to change his own oil on an old Sportster we kept around for exactly that kind of lesson. Nobody made a thing of any of it. That was sort of the point. Earl showed up at the courthouse on the day of the hearing with a lawyer of his own and the particular calm of a man who'd never once in his life expected to lose. What he hadn't accounted for was the parking lot. 76 of us rode in that morning, from 4 chapters across 3 counties, filling every space outside that small courthouse and lining the road for a quarter-mile beyond it. We didn't shout. We didn't block a single door that wasn't ours to block. We stood in the cold in our leather and our patches, calm as a congregation, while Earl Hutchins walked from his car to the courthouse steps past more men than he'd probably seen in one place in his life, every one of them looking at him like they already knew exactly what kind of man he was and weren't in any hurry to be wrong about it. A few of the younger riders wanted to say something to him directly as he passed. I heard at least 2 get talked down by older members before he was within earshot, but in the end nobody said a single word. We'd agreed beforehand that the quietest possible version of 76 bikers was the loudest message we could send a man like that, and watching his pace slow down about halfway across that lot told me we'd guessed right. He never said much in that courtroom. Renata laid out the guardianship case clean and plain, the months on a storage loft floor, the fever, the missing person filing that lined up suspiciously well with a benefit check, the doctor's notes, the school records. Earl's lawyer tried to make something of the fact that a motorcycle club was petitioning for custody of a minor, and the judge, an older woman who'd clearly seen every kind of family a courtroom could produce, looked past us out the window at the 76 bikes parked in a silence Earl Hutchins's lawyer couldn't quite explain away, and asked him plainly whether his client had ever once gone looking for the boy himself instead of filing paperwork. He didn't have an answer that held up. I remember the silence that followed the question stretching long enough that even Earl's own lawyer seemed to be waiting on an answer that wasn't coming. The guardianship was granted to me that afternoon, with Dutch and Renata named as backup should anything happen to me, which is about as close as Eastern Kentucky family court gets to handing a boy 76 new fathers in writing. Earl Hutchins didn't come back around. I heard, secondhand, that he moved 2 counties over within the year, and I've never once gone looking to confirm it, because some men aren't worth the gas money to keep tabs on. Cole's 17 now. He still lives above Dutch's garage, though these days that's mostly because he likes the quiet, not because he has nowhere else to go. He fixed the jukebox properly 2 summers back, real parts and everything, and the coffee can in the clubhouse has never once been allowed to run dry on his watch. He calls us by our road names like he's always known them, and he's the only person under 30 I've ever seen Singer let drive his truck. Every October now, around the same week he first climbed through that busted window, Cole cooks dinner for the whole chapter, nothing fancy, usually just chili and cornbread, but enough of it for 30 hungry men, and he won't let anybody else near the stove that one night a year. Dutch calls it Cole's anniversary. Cole just calls it Tuesday, like it's nothing, the same way he calls most things nothing that clearly aren't. We never made a ceremony out of any of it. No patch-in, no speech, nothing official beyond a judge's signature in a county courthouse. But every one of us knows exactly what happened that winter, and every one of us has stopped, at least once, mid-conversation, to watch that boy move through our clubhouse like he owns a piece of it, because he does. People in town still call us outlaws when it suits them. I've come to think the word never fit half as well as the one Cole uses now, when somebody new asks him how he ended up riding with a chapter of grown men who aren't any blood relation to him at all. He just says we're his brothers. Doesn't explain further. Never has to.